Is that the worst part of all?
Midichlorians. Someone was like, oh. I was like, yeah, I'm totally geeky, whatever. They're like, oh yeah? Well, what are midichlorians? I'm like, they're BS? They're like, no. Oh, okay, that's a good answer. Yeah.
The worst part of the prequel, midichlorians. Really? Is that a cool spiritual? You can just count how much force I have?
What about magical flying R2? I mean, yeah. He couldn't do that before.
Let's just
really handy in the swamp.
We need we need to just change this whole path. This is about Star Wars now. Oh, here's a question. When they put Anakin in the suit, did they decide this suit that keeps him alive? You know what this needs? A cape. And we're gonna apply the cape while he's laying flat. We're gonna lift him up and slide the cape on and lift him up. Stupid. Anyway, I'm sorry you guys had to see that. Let me take a deep breath. I'm not in the best shape, as you can see. Okay, yes?
Translate the terminology, like science fiction and Gundam, fighting moves like Sengoku Basura, natural spells, stuff like that.
For saying like for specific like scientific terms and stuff, and
Like fake
made up
oh,
science.
fake terms. Like freaking midichlorians. Oh, I'm sorry, you don't have that much force. I'll give you an injection and you can have some of mine. It's like a transfusion.
I love technobabble and all
I
that.
think it's
Yeah.
awesome.
In fact, it's when you're not talking about something that's real and factual and can be proven wrong, it's so much easier because you can get away with whatever you want. You know, you can make up midichlorians or whatever, and it's all good until people see it. But so yeah, I think it's very freeing to be able to do to work on something like that where you are kind of just winging it and doing your own thing. I know I love, like on Basara, one of the things that was so fun about that was that, yeah, some characters spoke like very archaic, very formal, and some didn't, and that gave me so much freedom, but it was so difficult. That was the one show that I could not write from beginning to end. I had to go in and do characters. Because once I got into that casual sort of idea, I had to stay with that casual, that looseness. Otherwise, some of that might creep into the formal guy, and vice versa. So yeah, I started going through in batches of characters, really. I would write Date and Keiji at the same time, because they both had very similar speech patterns. Then I would go and write Takeda and Uesigi at the same time, because they spoke to each other in the same way. Sasuke fell in the, pretty much I'd write Sasuke and Kasuga together too, because their interactions were so fun. Yes.
Especially
Movie girl. Yes, Kasuga's costume was awesome.
Yeah, I used to think that'd be really liberating until I worked on Gundam, which has like 30 plus years of lore and very specific, often like some of it's a bit nonsensy. Fortunately, we have Mark Simmons, who is the PhD in Gundam. He majored in Gundam in university. And then he wrote the book. He's amazing. He knows everything about it. His encyclopedic knowledge of it is like okay, whatever. Lucas ruined our baby, but I mean, he like knows everything about everything to do with Star Wars. Like, I talked to the DP of Star Wars, actually, the later ones, and he was like, man, doing like, at the ranch, they would have like screenings, and every animation team would get up and be like, oh, we did this section, sir, and they would show a thing. He'd be like, at this point, the rebellion, blah, 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 there's more damage to the ship. So the age the red to be more brick, and the blaster fire that the enemies used was this kind of technology, so it would tinge, like it would brown the ship in this way, like all this amazing stuff that we don't know about, even as fans of Star Wars. But so there's all this stuff going on in Gundam that I was like, well, can't you just write this? And they're like, no, it has to be this language in this way, and some of it makes it a little bit awkward, but it's built into the history of it. And then there's a sound effect that someone's having a new type moment, and then you're like, oh, that's ESP. That's cool.
Lady in that very curly shirt.
How do you choose voices? I remember watching, like Princess Mononoke, the Japanese version, the wolf voice is a man's. And then the American dub version, it's, Gillian Anderson, a woman's voice. So do you try and just go with the best actor or the best feeling for the part, or try and match the voices to the same Japanese tone?
Well, choosing the actor isn't really up to the script writer, though. I mean, when we're writing a script, especially if it's for a brand new show or a film that hasn't been cast yet, for one thing, when like Chris was talking about it being solitary, we're sitting there at our computers doing the voice that we imagine, like this is how I would do it, the voice for every single character. And you can't just kind of type it and think, oh, that looks good, or just sort of read it like, oh, I'm so happy to see you. I mean, every single line of dialogue in that script, you have to perform it out loud as you just imagine an actor would do it. And sometimes, I mean, do you do that? Like you kind of cast it in your head, like who you think would be doing the voice or the kind of voice that it is, or?
I cast myself in my head for every part.
But I mean, you do, you have to kind of, you imagine who might do that role or how that role might sound. And I mean, sometimes you don't know if it would be a man or a woman. If it's like an animal or something like that, it could go either way. But, you know, you're performing it all yourself, and that's one of the reasons they're always going to have to be tweaked in the studio later, because you're just one person. And so your own personal cadence is not going to match the cadence of every single actor. It might be faster, might be slower.
There have been incidences for me as a writer where I was writing on a show that I was also voice acting in, and then once I heard the actor play a certain part, then it all of a sudden became so much easier for me to write for that character.
Longer running shows where they've cast it and you're still working on what comes later, it is so much easier once you know what that character sounds like, because especially for those of us who work in, we do the directing and we know, other actors who know everybody. Like Tiffany's been around, 80 long, she knows everybody, and so she knows what everybody's going to sound like. We know, generally what most of our other actors, are what their cadence is.
Right,
What their,
certain actors speak really fast, certain
Right.
actors like Jason Douglas is more measured, slower.
Yeah.
paced.
So being able to write for an actor is so helpful. So helpful.
Have you ever been disappointed by, as you're doing it in your head, and you're thinking of who's doing what, and then you're doing all the voices, and then you hear the line like, oh, that's not what I thought at all.
Yes, sometimes I am disappointed when I hear how it turns out, like who they cast or how they did a certain thing. The worst one for me was an Angelic Layer. It's a game, and the players of the game are called deuses. They operate these little robot characters who fight in this arena. And in the actual produced version of the show, the director, instead of having the actors call each player a deus, he had them say deuce.
No!
It killed me, especially as I got cast in the show and then had to say deuce because everybody else was already saying it. And of course, when I was writing it, deus is 2 syllables. So that's a big problem with deuce, which means like the number 2.
It means number 2, all right.
Oh my God. Yeah, and it was kind of number 2, let me tell you. So that's my single most, I think, disappointing thing ever. I had to effing say it because they had already recorded so many other actors in whatever number of episodes, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, like Deus Ex Machina? I mean, what?
I believe you meant Deus Ex Machina.
Thank you for correcting me, Chris.
The first time I ever saw an episode that I wrote but did not direct, I was a little unnerved. I was a little horrified because, but that's because, as someone who also directs, when I write that line, I have the line read in my head already, and that's how I would tell the actor to do it if I were directing it. So when another director or another actor brings something different to it, it might be perfectly fine. It might be perfectly, it might make perfect sense in the context of the scene, but it's not what I wrote.
That's doubtful, Chris, that it would be perfect. The way you had it was right.
Duh. The writer is always right. That's what it's called, a writer.
Writer?
Yes.
Well, it's kind of like it's very much like reading a book that you love and then seeing it turn into, it's made into a film.
Like Twilight.
Made only 6 hours from here, from what I understand.
Rainiest place on earth.
Yeah, I mean, you get inside the characters' heads, you fuse and merge with the story, and then it becomes something else, and then you've got Then you got deuces flying everywhere. You got deuces in the machine, which is disgusting, as we discussed. This machine's all deuced up. Actually, I like it now. Because it sounds like something like in the potty. Because I'm 7 years old and I laugh with poo. Yes?